Hello. Hi. Hello, everyone. Can someone give me a thumbs up to tell me that you guys can hear me? Can I get a thumbs up? This is always my issue. I don't know if you guys can hear me or not. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. Can you guys hear me? Can I get a thumbs up? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, now we're getting the thumbs up. Thank you, guys. Thanks for joining us. We are here today once again, doing a very quick, probably I'll try to keep it within half an hour, an Instagram live, and we're going to talk about what we call a site positive approach to architecture and site planning. And honestly, I wasn't sure that people will be interested in the topic, but we've had tremendous amount of interest. So thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, it's one of my favorite topics to talk about. So I'm excited that a lot of you are also interested in talking about it. We've received a whole bunch of questions. And yeah, we're very keen to talk more about it, and this could be sort of an introduction, and then we can do further discussions later over comments and messages. Someone here is saying that the water features that we've designed are amazing. Thank you. We obviously don't do it alone. It is a team, and we usually work with some very very talented people who really care about the environment, and I think that is what results in this sort of a beautiful product. So I do want to thank everyone, and specifically for House of Three Pavilions, where we did the pond and the bioswales. We worked with environmental consultants out of Bombay called Grassroots Research, and which is led by Pallavi Latkar, who I have an amazing amount of respect for, and they really were instrumental in us achieving what we've achieved. And I think another interesting point is that this IG Live is very timely because our project, House of Three Pavilions, was selected to be exhibited at the London Design Biennale, which is going on right now. So yeah, I'm excited that we're talking about it right now while it's being exhibited on a global platform in London. Okay, guys, so I'm going to stop sharing this image and we can get to it. Okay. Hi. All right. So, as I said, really excited that a lot of you are interested in the topic. And I think that, the interest, which is very exciting to me, is also because, we're going beyond just the pretty pictures. So I like that. I like that we're really kind of going in depth into details, and we're talking about pros and cons of either materials or implementing a certain strategy, and we're talking about the challenges in the implementation. So we're really going beyond the very basics of aesthetics, which aesthetics are great and they're lovely, but I do feel like that is just a starting point for architecture, and to actually achieve a really good product there needs to be a lot of depth to it, and not just the kind of just a pretty picture that you look at. So what is a site positive approach? We have a graphic for that too. We define a site positive approach to be a tool where we are actually creating a positive impact on the site where we're building. We're also trying to minimize the negative impact of the construction on the land. Now, this is more critical to us because we, are usually building at Grounded. We're usually building these larger homes in very beautiful locations. So we've built in Goa, we've built in the Western Ghats, and all these sites, which we are very lucky, are greenfield sites. So they're beautiful green properties without previous development on it. So that is actually the reason why I personally feel that our responsibility to kind of imbibe with this sort of a site positive approach and this kind of thinking is more important, because we are going into these lovely, beautiful green locations with, which has abundant biodiversity. And with our architecture, we must try to preserve it, conserve it. But then the site positive approach is actually where we actually try to add to it. So we try to enhance the natural features, the beauty of the site as we found it, pre-construction. So I think the reason why we're defining it as a site positive approach and not as a site responsive approach alone is because what we are saying is that yes, let's conserve and preserve the amazing beauty and biodiversity that we find on our sites, but we're also saying that can we, by being thoughtful, by being responsible designers, can we actually leave our sites better than how we found them? Okay, stop sharing. Okay, so I'm gonna go into questions. We've actually ordered them in a way that we'll basically talk about what is site positive planning and how to do it and things like that. So the very first question is, any thoughts on heavily contoured sites and feelings about breaking the sanctity of the earth? I always feel a bit of apprehension to cut into a hillside to build and disturb eons worth of soil. Uh, Absolutely wonderful question. Yes, and it is a great way for me to start talking about how do you practice this kind of site positive approach to architecture and planning. So the very first thing that you must do is understand your site, because every site is unique, and whatever you propose has to be a response to what you find on the site. So what does that mean, right? So responding to this question, it's very important to understand what is the geography of your site, what are the levels of the site, and also understand your site in a bit of a regional context if that is possible. And I think now with Google Earth, and just these simple resources that we have available free of cost online, understanding the regional context of your site has become very, very easy. In fact, I did not know this because we used to actually look at topographic plans, but talking to a young landscape architect from Goa recently, I learned that you can actually use a regional plan from Google Earth and then use tools in SketchUp to actually model it in 3D. So if you can do that, then you can actually understand how does your site, where does your site lie with respect to surrounding geography, right? So is it like at the base of a mountain, which may be far away, which you actually don't see from the site, so you actually don't know it's there? Or is it a part of a larger sort of this water collection system, right? Which again, if you don't know the area, if you're not if you have not built in that area before, you may not know, but then the moment you start looking at it regionally, you'll understand. So, the idea is to try to understand the site and then, obviously preserve those patterns that exist. Then also, as I said, yeah, understand the levels within the site, then the water patterns on the site. I always insist for our projects to do a soil test, before we start work on any project. A lot of times, that is considered unnecessary and, an unnecessary expense, even though it is a fixed cost and it's actually not that expensive. I insist on it because it actually really helps with not just understanding how to design the structure and have a structure that responds to the soil and the substrata, but it also really helps you to understand the underground water levels and the water patterns. So you may have a site where at certain places the water level is high and in certain places the water level is low, but all of these things can then help you in designing your building to respond to these existing water patterns in the site. As I said, if, for example, at the House of Three Pavilions, we realized that regionally the site was within a watershed, was lying between watershed systems. So there were like higher elevation areas, and the site was on the route of the water that was running off from the higher elevation and then draining into the Arabian Sea. So and that's why we had to really think about channeling this water and not just have building something that basically obstructs this regional watershed that was happening in that area. Along with that, it's also very important to understand the kind of trees. So a lot of times, most of the times when we go into a site, we do a tree survey. And we use certain resources, such as there are these amazing books called Jungle Trees of India. And so we use the that book to actually identify the trees on our site, because a lot of times when we get surveys done, the surveyors will mark the trees, but they only are able to identify the main trees, like mango or cashew, like the main prominent tree varieties. But a lot of times, most of the trees will be just marked as jungle trees. So we actually go in and identify these trees, because it's super important. The trees, like there are certain trees which may be very fragile. For example, the drumstick tree is a very fragile tree. So a lot of times in storms, it tends to break and fall. So, you can actually, if you know that, then you will be careful in positioning your building close to a drumstick tree. There are trees, for example, a tamarind tree has very, very small leaves. So, when it sheds the leaves, it can create a lot of litter. So again, that can help you in your design decision making. Then there are trees that are fragrant, which you can also employ very beautifully in your design. There are trees which require more water. There are trees that require less water. So sorry, I can go on and on, right? But the point is that it's, yes, they're jungle trees. What jungle trees means is that they're local indigenous trees. They're not like fancy fruiting or flowering trees. But these trees, are great because they are suited for that climate. They are already, maybe to a certain level of maturity, that they don't require water and additional irrigation and taking care of. So, those are just the most wonderful resources to have on the site, which must be preserved and conserved and then used as design drivers for your design, thinking. Then obviously look at existing rocks and views. So all of these things. So basically what I'm saying is that the site positive approach starts with understanding your site inside out. Understand what's under the soil in your site, understand what's around the site. Have an understanding of your neighbors. So, I also think that sustainability is not just about the environment, but also you must have, some level of cultural sustainability. So understand your neighbors, understand, the people around you, and don't just build without, thinking about their lives, because you're going to be impacting, your building will impact their lives as well. So now going back to the question of the heavily contoured site, I totally agree that if you are working on contoured sites, then it's best to try to minimize hill cutting. And in fact, in a lot of places, including Goa, if your sites have a very steep slope, then actually it's illegal to cut that hill, because once again you are destabilizing that hill, and therefore it can become prone, depending on your intervention, but it can become prone to landslides and mudslides, especially for example in a place like Goa where you have very heavy monsoon. It can also lead to erosion of fertile topsoil. It can also disturb the sort of the water runoff from the higher elevations to the lower elevations. So yes, the point is have minimal intervention, have minimal, try to have minimum change to the existing environmental systems that exist. And if you are changing something, then try to replace it with something that can still sort of serve that purpose. so so heavily contoured sites, I think it's best to try to minimize cutting. You can always build on stills. Another thought is that, whatever you cut, you try to fill an equivalent amount somewhere else on the site. And at least what that does is that even though you're cutting, you're not then taking out all of that earth and then dumping it elsewhere, outside of your site. So if you could use it within whatever you excavate, if you could use it within the site for, filling of certain areas or for landscaping or something, then that is preferred. I think your apprehension, whoever asked this question, sorry, I don't have the name, but if you have an apprehension of cutting into a hillside, I think that's a very sound apprehension that you have, and you must hang on to that. Next question: what is the best way to do a heat and climate study? How should one go about site analysis? So, I hope that an architect is not asking me this question, because this is something that's taught in, the very first year of in architecture school. And there is a reason why architecture education is 5 years long, because there are just so many aspects to study. Again, there's just so much, now all of this information of, climate, rainfall, wind direction, all of this is available online free of cost. So it's not that difficult to achieve this information. But I also tell, my teammates that every time they go to the site, they should always check wind direction, because even though you may get the region's weather parameters online, the specific information per site, can only be collected through a very good observation. So, whenever you're on the site, try to observe the wind patterns, try to observe, what time of the day and year you're there, and then look at the way the sun is, coming onto the site, and also look at the wild vegetation. So that part I love, because, you'll notice that the wildflowers and the wild vegetation will vary throughout the year. And, those are again things that can be preserved and integrated into the landscape. Okay. Okay, someone is asking me, which I think there is another question here, similar question, so we'll take this up now. The question is about the pond design. So it's saying, I'm curious about the pond design, especially. Oh no, this is different. Okay, we'll first take up the question on the pond at House with Three Pavilions. So someone's asking, how does it work? Okay, so when we went to the site for the House of Three Pavilions pre-construction, we noticed that there was a slight depression in the center of the site. And it was very interesting, because it was slightly marshy, that land in that depression, and we could see egrets and the marshy water birds there. So that was actually the genesis of this pond, which obviously the first time is between the time when I first saw the site and today, I think it's been more than 5 or 6 years, but the point is that it was the very first impression that has led to the pond being what it is today. So and it was very obvious that all the water from the site was actually directed towards the central depression, and therefore the water was collected in that pond, and then it would percolate underground. What was also interesting was that there was an existing well which was actually sort of on the circumference of this depression. So what we did was that we knew that this is an important water systems. And then to add to it, when we got the soil study done for the site, we found that the water level, the underground water level in the site was quite high. We also observed that in the well ourselves, where even in the dry season, the well water, the top of the well water was always at a very high level. So for us, because we are because we are deeply committed to sustainability, and we following this sort of site positive approach to planning, we knew that we had to preserve that. And otherwise, like, we would be like any other architect and builder, where we just basically don't care about these things because you don't see it. And we just build a very beautiful building which looks really amazing in pictures and Instagram and magazines, and gets rave reviews, but it no one really knows what's happening underground, right? But we really wanted to preserve that, and we were very lucky to have clients who also agreed with us. So we actually, as I said, engaged with environmental consultants who helped us in technically designing the pond. We also knew that aesthetically we wanted the pond to be as natural as possible. We didn't want it to be an artificial water body. We wanted it to be a seasonal water body, and where now, when it's done, basically in the monsoon, the water fills up in the pond, and then as the year goes on and we reach the driest point in the year, the water recedes. The pond water is connected with the well water, so therefore it is connected to the underground water level. So there is direct percolation and recharge of the underground water that's happening through the well. Also, we've built the entire pond with stone as a stone retaining wall. The walls of the pond as a stone retaining wall, which is stone pitching with no mortar, cement mortar, and therefore it is highly permeable. So basically the entire surface area of the pond allows for the rainwater to be percolated. And as we have built new structures on the site, we have designed a system of rainwater harvesting where we collect all the rainwater from the roofs of the new buildings, and that is then directed towards the pond. So that is also put inside the pond. So all the site water goes into the pond, plus all the rainwater runoff from the roofs is also directed towards the pond. So the pond is one, that's sort of the key element of this water system that we've designed. But if you've been following our Instagram and looking at our pictures and posts, you will also see that this pond is then further connected to a system of bioswales that we've designed, which didn't exist earlier. These bioswales basically kind of run throughout the site, because the site is very large and the pond is in the center of it. So the bioswales actually is a network that spreads the rainwater to a larger surface area. And once again, the bioswales are designed in a way that they're built with stone pitching or with stone gabion walls, which don't use any mortar. And therefore, the walls and the base, the entire structure of the bioswale allows for rainwater to permeate back into the underground water. Now, the advantages of doing all of this is obviously which is our favorite advantage, is that we have retained the biodiversity that we found on the site pre-construction. So, we found peacock eggs on the site. We found, bulbul. I think if you've seen those photographs again on Instagram, we found a bulbul nest where we actually saw the little birdies come out. We have seen parrot nests. We've seen parrot birds, like little parrot babies, lovely dragonflies, and just lovely insect life as well. So yeah, that's our favorite advantage, is to be able to preserve the biodiversity even after building, constructing on the site. And then the second advantage is that because we are recharging so much rainwater to the underground, we have been able to retain the underground level at a very high level, which benefits not just us but the village and the region and Goa. We have And then the way we have actually expanded the system of water percolation over a larger surface area on the site means that our soil remains moist for a longer time in the year, and that basically reduces the amount of irrigation that's required for the landscape on the land. So there are multiple benefits of what we've done, and also I think that it just makes the landscape design on our sites very, very unique, very special, functional, and something that you can't just replicate by putting ornate species of plants and doing a very kind of formal or manicured landscaping. So that's House of Three Pavilions. And then the next question is related, which is basically someone's asking about the maintenance requirements for a pond and aeration requirements. So, yes, if you have standing water, which would be in an artificial water body, you would require aeration. Since our water body is a natural water body where, the water level is rising and falling, and as per the seasons, and a lot of percolation is happening. Plus, our water body is connected to the well water, which is actually the underground source of water. So, in a way, the water in the pond is actually connected to the underground water table. We don't really have a requirement for a pump or aeration or any of those things. We have put fish in the water that basically there is, and it's a very active sort of natural pond. So there is like fish, there are frogs, so basically there is a whole like life cycle, biodiverse habitat happening there. So in that case, we don't require artificial aeration because there are fish and frogs and all these things to actually eat the bugs and the mosquitoes. So it's a living thing. Then the next question, which is very interesting, is how can one go about a site? How can one be site positive in an urban area? So a very, very good question. I have been talking about greenfield sites since the beginning of this session. But, I think that the point is that if you follow the same approach, you can do it anywhere. So, for example, we are working on a project in Chennai, and it's a very urban project, but I, am sort of on track to try to convince the client to, collect the rainwater from the building and actually put it into an existing borehole. Chennai as a region has huge water problems, and this is something that we must do. In a way, actually, in urban areas, collecting rainwater and recharging existing bore wells or new bore wells is easier, because your building footprint is limited, and therefore your collection systems can be very much like centralized and simple, and easy to execute, and less expensive as well. Like the additional cost will be reduced. So don't let the fact that your site is in an urban area, discourage you from doing the right thing. Okay, then someone's asking us about how should one go about treescaping on vacant land. Excellent question, and maybe we'll do an Instagram live on this as well, because we have come across this lovely organization, which I think I mentioned in one of my previous Insta lives as well, called A Forest, which is based out of Bangalore. And what they do is they actually build indigenous urban forests, for anyone, for any client. And they follow a technique called the Miyawaki method, which is a Japanese technique of growing forests. And the point is that they go into an area, and they will do the soil development, and they will plant this forest, which I think requires you to take care of it for 2 or 3 years. And then after that, it can actually be a self-sustaining beautiful forest, which again will provide a habitat for, immense biodiversity, plus will be a lovely recreation space, for the users. So yes, so please look them up. They are A Forest, AFFOREST. And we'll also possibly put a link or tag them so you guys can, look them up. I think we're running out of time. So we have a whole bunch of questions about interiors, guys, about materials and interiors. So what we could potentially do is keep collecting these questions and maybe do another Insta live to answer them, because today I just really want to just stick to this one topic. We have some questions here on the chat, and someone's asking about any resources to refer to so we can implement in urban areas. You know what? I don't think you guys need to really look very far for resources. First of all, use your common sense. Use the wisdom that a lot of our ancestors had. And as I said, like, if you just follow your design process by understanding the site and understanding, how can you make things better? How can you preserve and conserve, the natural sort of processes around your site? I think you can't get it wrong. So, start with that question in your head. I think that would be a really good start. Now, okay. There's another question about residence, I think, in a very tight sort of urban site. Guys, you can't let these constraints bog you down, because actually constraints make for good design, make for better design, because, they actually, can lead you to think beyond what is known and what, other people have done. And therefore, you can actually, it gives you an opportunity to come up with really unique solutions. And then there is another question about water management practices for urban homes. And there's a question about applying for internship at Grounded. Okay, so about water management, we will do another Instagram live next week, next Friday, on rainwater harvesting. So on that Instagram live, we can talk about rural as well as urban, areas, and we can talk about the different strategies, pros and cons. So, if you have any further questions, let us know, and we can talk about that in detail next week at the same time on Friday, and about applying for internships. Yes, we get a lot of applications, and it's sort of like a rolling process. So whenever we need anyone, we actually start to look at. Go through our previous sort of emails and applications. So yes, just send us an email at admin@buildgrounded.com. Okay, guys, we have to end it here, but we'll take your questions regarding a lot of rainwater issues in our next Instagram live next week. Thank you for joining in. It was a pleasure, and we'll chat more next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.